Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10 and support the channel at the same time. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to the third day of official Rivals of Ixalan previews. We got a lot of great cards to talk about again today. It's been an awesome week, actually. Some strong cards coming, a lot of cards that are going to impact Standard, even a few that could impact Modern, and today's no exception, actually. So quickly before we get into it, though, just a real fast reminder, if you appreciate the channel and what we do and you're looking for a way to support us, just check out the description below. You're going to find links to our Patreon page, as well as product links on Amazon, which include Rivals of Ixalan, but anything you purchase on Amazon, once you go through that link, we'll get a small percentage. And then finally, also Flipside Gaming is another way to support us through using our promo code, and hopefully you can save some cash too. With that being said, let's get into it. Forerunner of the Legion. This is actually the first of 4 cards that are part of a cycle. This one is the Vampire version. This costs a white and 2 Vampire Knight 2/2. When this enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a Vampire card, reveal it, shuffle, put it on top. Whenever another Vampire enters the battlefield under your control, target creature gets +1/+1 till end of turn. Okay, out of the 4 versions, I think this one's fine. I do think it maybe has a chance of seeing some standard play in a Vampire deck, and I do think there will be a Vampire-centric deck. I mean, the mono-white Vampire deck actually looked pretty good in the last meta, but unfortunately it didn't quite get there to top tier. Although a lot of people played it, it looked pretty good in the Pro Tour. All the decks there made it to day 2. So I do think with these additional cards, we are going to see a better version of that deck. I do think it's going to at least be splashing black, if not going a little deeper into black. But a card like this could fit into that style of deck and maybe does see a little bit of standard play. Tutors are good effects, even if they are a little situational. Like this one can only pull vampires, and yes, it doesn't go right into your hand, goes to the top of your library, but if there's a essential or key vampire you need at a given time, then this is going to help you get there and make your deck a little more consistent. So because of that, it's a powerful card. Now, aside from that, it also has that trigger ability, which is just going to help you a little bit, just get maybe some incremental damage here and there, which does matter when you're dealing with a lot of small creatures and trying to go wide, which a lot of times vampires are trying to do. I also think this is a fine pickup for you in your limited games, draft or sealed, as long as you have enough targets for this. You want to have a good vampire or 2 to tutor up with this thing. If you don't, then you probably skip it. But if you do have a good target, then you're going to be really happy to run this. Alright, this next card comes to us from a Japanese language preview. It's Mysterious End. It costs a white and 1. It's an enchantment, and whenever this enters the battlefield, exile target creature with converted mana cost 3 or less that opponent controls. When this leaves the battlefield, target opponent creates a 3/3 green dinosaur creature token with trample. So I do want to point out, as long as this translation is correct, which I think it is, if you're playing multiplayer, like for example Commander, you can exile somebody's creature, and when the thing does go away, the dinosaur doesn't necessarily have to go to that player. You could choose to give it to someone else. So that's actually kind of interesting. Now, for 1v1 engagements, is this good enough to see standard play? I actually think it is, because control decks don't really have an answer to some of the quick creatures that could come down early right now. Like, they don't have a Silk Wrap, in other words. This is their Silk Wrap, I think. Maybe not quite as good as that card was, but at the same time, you know what? Like, hopefully you can deal with that 3/3 dinosaur token later on in the game, and this is going to let you not get beat down early in the game when you're trying to get your control engine going. Maybe you can bounce that token or something later on, but you're going to deal with those early problems that could put you on your back foot too early if you're playing control. So I do think this card does see play. Maybe it shows up in like approach decks or some other version of control. I do think Esper control could be a possibility in a future meta, if not this next one coming up. So you could see the card show up in places like that. It's also fine for you in Limited just for the same reasons. Like, you need removal in Limited. It's a key part of your deck. And if this is what you have in your pool, yeah, you're going to be okay running this. Sphinx's Decree. This costs a white and 1. It's a sorcery rare. Each opponent can't cast instant or sorcery spells during that player's next turn. Okay, this is a very niche card, right? Like, you have to have a reason to play this. Like, this is definitely a sideboard card. And I think it's here more or less as a stopgap, just in case something gets a little out of hand in the world of Standard, like a combo style deck that's using an instant or sorcery spell. And I think it's good that they're starting to sprinkle these type of cards into the Standard environment, because that does lead to, hopefully, if they do make a mistake, having an answer for it. We haven't seen that in recent history. So I can't think of a really important reason to have this card today, but I'm glad it exists. Furthermore, if you go beyond Standard, like, there's other cards that are better than this, like Silence, for example. And I'm not going to play this over a lot of those other cards, so it kind of is what it is. Might be interesting, perhaps, for commander or multiplayer because it does affect all opponents. The only thing I can think of with a card like this, because it is cheap, it does make combo decks like sit out a turn. So like Storm or something in Legacy or Vintage or even Modern, I suppose. Like, you can slow them down. If you think they're about to go off, you can buy yourself one more turn. And sometimes in a format like Modern, maybe that's enough to actually win the game. Maybe you're in a mirror matchup or something like that. Who knows? But I do think there's maybe better cards out there you'd probably use over this one. Surge of Memories. Okay, this one comes to us from a Russian language preview. This costs 2 blue. It's a sorcery. Return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand and then exile this. Kind of like the blue regrowth, I guess. I really wish this was an instant. I don't feel like this would have been broken as an instant considering it's 2 blue. Maybe make it 2 blue and 1 or something. I don't know. But I think that would have been better for your control builds. Is it unplayable though? No, I don't think it's unplayable. I do think some control decks, if they're really reliant on certain sorceries or instants, will still maybe run a copy or two of this just to make sure their hand stays fresh and they get what they need. As far as limited goes, as long as you have targets for this, it's very playable. I mean, most of the time you're going to have like that big sorcery or instant removal spell in your deck that you might want to play again. So as long as you have the targets, yeah, this can be very runnable there too. Maybe not an early pick, but something you pick up maybe mid to later portion of the pack perhaps. Warsail Marauder. Okay, this one comes to us from a French language preview. It's a blue and 1 pirate human with flying. Whenever this attacks, target creature defending player controls loses all abilities and has base power and toughness 0-1 until end of turn. It's a 2-1. Okay, let's talk about limited first with this one. I love 2-1 flyers for a blue and 1 in limited. I play them all the time. A lot of times they have drawbacks. I still play them. This one actually has upside to it, and not a little bit of upside either. That ability is great, and this thing's a pirate too, which is going to interact very well with other pirates or Pirate Matters cards, and also interact very well with Raid. And Raid is going to be something that can be turned on maybe quite easily with a card like this on the battlefield, because you can attack into 1 in the air that covers your Raid. You can do whatever you want to do after that point. Or even if they have a blocker in the air that's larger, you can target that blocker with this ability, and now your opponent is in a real tough spot. You turned on Raid again, and maybe this thing still survived. So that's actually kind of awesome. I can see myself playing with this quite a bit, whether I'm using Raid effects or not, honestly, in Sealed and Draft. Now, what about Standard, though? What about Constructed Standard? Can a card this simple, this small get there? I actually think it could, and here's why. You may have heard of Energy. Energy is kind of a popular mechanic nowadays. Well, there's a card there called Bristling Hydra, and this really messes up that strategy. If you have a Bristling Hydra staring at you across the battlefield, you attack with this, your opponent's got some tough decisions to make. You target the Hydra, and now they have to think, do they have a removal spell in their hand? Because this is their last opportunity to give it hexproof. If they decide to give it hexproof, they're using 3 energy, so starting to eat into their energy. If they don't use the energy, then it is open to a removal spell. So you could even bluff this. You might have no removal spell and you're trying to put them back on energy, just attack, target the Hydra. They have a tough call there. And maybe they just start eating into their own energy reserve, and that's only going to be good for you. And you know what? If you have a removal spell, well, even better. If they don't buy into it, then you can get rid of the thing. Yeah, this card is good enough, I think, to see play in Standard. Maybe it's out of sideboards, but I think that interaction alone is going to bring it into that competitive format, which is pretty crazy. Duska Legion Zealot. This costs a black and 1. It's a Vampire Soldier, common 1-1. When this enters the battlefield, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. I actually like this card quite a bit. Let's talk about limited first. A card that can replace itself, even if it's a small creature like this, always is a ton of value. Because if it's a 1-1 body going on the battlefield, especially in a vampire strategy, say in draft, this could be quite good because you're trying to go wide anyway. So just a 1-1, maybe you're lucky enough to have like a Lord or an Anthem effect, so it does become more than a 1-1, and you're getting that board presence and the card's replacing itself and you're getting something else out of it. That's actually pretty awesome. Reminds me a lot of Phyrexian Rager, that of course was a black and 2/2/2, but did the same thing. And that card's always been great. Now, I prefer 2/2s to 1/1s. I'd even rather pay 1 more mana for the 2/2 over the 1/1. I mean, power and toughness is actually doubled with the 2/2. Just has more of a board presence. But with that being said, this is still a very good card. I could see myself drafting this maybe mid to even upper portion of a pack. I think it is actually that good. And this is a phenomenal card. You're going to be happy to play it in Sealed or Draft. What about Standard? Could it get there? Maybe. I'm going to say this. Your vampire deck right now, before this new set came out, was a mono white deck. I do think it's going to start thinking about splashing black due to some of the cards we saw yesterday. How deep is it going to go into black, though, is the question, considering this is a 2-drop. If it goes deep enough, if you're looking at a 50-50, 60-40 build, then yeah, some of these could see some standard play in that deck. I wouldn't be shocked at that, actually. But if it doesn't go that deep, then maybe this card gets skipped. So we'll have to kind of see where the meta goes and how that deck actually pans out. But I wouldn't count this card out as standard, actually. Forerunner of the Coalition. This is a black and 2. This is the pirate version of Forerunners. Human pirates. It's an uncommon 2/2. When this enters the battlefield, you search your library for a pirate card, reveal it, then shuffle your library and put that card on top. And whenever another pirate enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life. Maybe the least exciting, honestly, of all the cards that are these Forerunners that we're seeing today. It is a pirate. I don't like paying 3 for a 2/2. The ability is okay, but it's not super exciting. Does hit all players, though, so keep that in mind when it comes to multiplayer games. But I don't know. I see this one being maybe the one that I draft the least. If I'm all in on pirates and it matters to have a lot of pirates, then it's going to be a good card for me. Or if I have a great pirate, like I opened Becca Brass or something and I want to be able to search that up, perhaps I put this in my deck. But most of the time, I don't even think this makes my cut in limited, and I really don't see it crossing over into standard. Golden Demise. This costs 2 black and 1. It's a sorcery uncommon with Ascend. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. If you have City's Blessing, instead only creatures your opponents control get -2/-2 till end of turn. This is actually a pretty good card. I wish it was an instant instead of a sorcery. It would be fantastic as an instant. But here's the way you got to look at this card. You can't assume you're going to have Ascend. I mean, if you have it, wonderful. But if you don't, you want to make sure this card is still good for you. So you're going to think about that in the build that you're using it, as well as the builds you could be going up against. So with that being said, do you see this in standard? Maybe out of the sideboard, but it just depends on the meta. The meta will have to have some decks in it where this is going to make sense. And maybe it's a deck like a small creature deck, sort of like the vampire deck, assuming the vampire deck's not going to lean heavy on Lord and Anthem effects, which honestly, I'm not kind of buying that. I think it is going to lead on Lord and Anthem effects, at times rendering this card maybe not quite as good. So I almost feel like even though this is cheap and very economical, I might rather opt for something like a regular traditional board sweep. There's a lot of good ones to choose from right now, as opposed to this just in the current meta. Now, that could change maybe when we see more cards from the set and such, but I think we're dealing with decks that are going to have some larger creatures. Lots of Lords, lots of Anthem effects, big dinosaurs potentially if that can work out. I don't think we're going to be really concerned with the -2/-2 quite as much as maybe we would have been in some other metas with maybe more aggressive decks that are coming in with a lot of small creatures or something like that. If one of those appears at some time, I'm glad this exists, and it could definitely show up in standard down the road. But I just think currently it's a good card that maybe just doesn't have quite the right place right now. For limited, the card's great. Again, you want to think about what you're playing versus what your opponent's playing. If you sit down at the table across from dinosaurs, maybe this card's not going to be also great for you. So perhaps you don't main deck this, just depending on your pool. You might bring it in when it's going to be a good matchup for you. But overall, like I said, I don't want to talk this card down because it's actually quite strong. And even though I do wish it was instant, it's still very, very playable and probably a very high draft pick still too. Tomb Robber. This costs a black and 2. It's a human pirate. It's a rare 1/1 with menace. Pay 1, discard a card, and it explores. Okay, this is interesting. Now, I like Repeatable Explorer, but do I like Repeatable Explorer on a 1/1 for 3 that's going to cost me a mana and a discard every time to do it? No, I don't like that at all. But I think if I look at the card this way, I'm kind of missing the point. This card is meant to be a discard outlet because there are some graveyard interactions within this set, and I think we're going to see some more in the future. So I think that's what this card is all about. And if you look any deeper than that, you might be missing the point on this one. I don't think this is all about a pirate menace that you're going to explore into making it a huge creature or anything. I don't think that's the plan here. Now, the problem is I think this is more of a cog in the machine. And I don't feel like we've seen enough of the machine yet to say this is good and this is something I want to play. Maybe we won't in this set. Maybe it's for the future. So with that being said, I don't like this card when it comes to limited purposes. I'm probably not running this unless I'm really desperate for a pirate or something like that. Or for standard purposes, yeah, I'm not going to touch this card. If there is a reanimation deck that appears in standard, maybe there's a long shot chance that this shows up because it's a way to get cards from your hand into the graveyard. And if that's necessary enough and there's not a lot of better options, okay, I concede this might see standard play. But I think for the most part, I haven't seen enough to make me really feel that way yet. I'm still very skeptical. So we'll kind of see what other cards come out this week. Fanatical Firebrand. This is a red Goblin Pirate. It's a common 1/1 with haste. I can tap and sack it, and it will deal 1 damage to target creature or player. I think this is a fine limited card. Like, I can see myself being pretty happy with it there. It turns on Enrage if I'm into dinosaurs, which is kind of cool. And it's also a nice little early beater to get some damage across, and you can chump block with it or something later. Or you might even just pull off that 1 point of damage to deal with the problematic 1 toughness creature, because there's actually some really good ones in the set we've been seeing. So if someone plays one of those and you put this down, at least you kind of have an answer to it. It has haste too, so it's really quick. Outside of that, I don't really see this doing much in standard this time around, even though it is a pretty cool like aggro card. I don't really see any deck that really is looking for this. Like Ramanap Red could go in this direction, but I kind of doubt it. I think it's better off not going too small. And I do think if we see an evolution in the red decks, they're going to go larger as opposed to getting smaller, just based on the cards that are in the card pool. So at least right now, I don't see this one getting there. Forerunner of the Empire. Okay, maybe one of my favorites, or my favorite out of the Forerunners. A red and 3 human soldier uncommon 1/3. And when this enters battlefield, you get to search up a dinosaur, reveal it, shuffle, put it on top. Whenever a dinosaur enters the battlefield under your control, you may have Forerunner of the Empire deal 1 damage to each creature. Okay, so this thing can turn on your Enrage abilities, and that's super sweet when you're playing around with dinosaurs, right? 4 mana for this one, but it has a little toughness behind it. 1 and 3, it can block a few small things, which is kind of nice, I suppose. Although 4, I mean, you're paying for it. But it's really about the tutor effect, and it's really about turning on Enrage. Again, if you have an important dinosaur that you want to tutor up, this is going to help you get there. And just throughout the game, just turning on Enrage could be pretty consequential. Could this maybe see standard play? Perhaps. We have to see what happens with the dinosaur deck. I do think it could go in a few different directions. We are getting more tools. The Gruul one was good. It was close, but it didn't quite get there last time. With these new tools, yeah, maybe it does get there. Is this part of it? I do think it could be, just because of the tutor effect, if nothing else. So this is definitely one to watch. What about your limited game? Well, in limited, again, it just depends on targets. If you have a great dinosaur target you want to get with this, maybe tutor up, make your deck a little more consistent, then yeah, sure, you're going to play this. You'll be pretty happy with it. Or maybe if you have some great Enrage abilities, another reason to play this. Probably better in Draft than Sealed. We're going to have more of an opportunity to go deeper into that tribe. I'm also going to tell you there's a card coming out real soon that's going to combo really well with this. So stay tuned. We're going to talk more about this card in a little bit. Rekindling Phoenix. Okay, this one's a mythic. It's 2 red and 2. It's a Phoenix, 4/3 flying. When this dies, create a 0/1 red elemental creature token with, at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this creature and return target card named Rekindling Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield, and it will gain haste till end of turn. Well, it's been a while since we saw a good Phoenix, and some of the old ones are okay, maybe better than this. I mean, if you could use mana to bring them back or something, that's kind of sweet. But you don't really see that in today's Magic. You're going to see something more like this, and this is actually not a bad card. 4 mana, 4/3 with flying, and it doesn't have haste. I kind of wish it did. But if it dies, my opponent's going to have to also deal with the token it leaves behind, or else they're not going to really accomplish anything, because the card's just going to come right back again. So they really have to use like 2 removal spells on this thing. It's also kind of board sweep proof, which is really sweet considering how many great board sweeps are out there right now. So with all that being said, does this see standard play? Yes, it does. I think this is actually a fantastic card, maybe to go right into Ramanap Red, or just an evolution of that deck, maybe something more mid-rangey or even bigger, who knows. But regardless, I do think this is a card that does show up in your standard meta, and it's also awesome and limited, like probably first pickable in most packs. Super sweet card, really hard to deal with if you don't have a couple answers for it. And using 2 removal spells on 1 creature, yes, go for it. By all means, be my guest, right? So really, really fantastic card here. Cherished Hatchling. Okay, this is a green and 1 dinosaur. It's an uncommon 2/1. When this dies, you may cast dinosaur spells this turn as though they had flash. And whenever you cast a dinosaur spell this turn, it gains when this creature enters the battlefield, you may have it fight another target creature. So this card was the preview card for MTG Young Mage. Always does a great job with the preview videos that he puts out. So check that out if you get a chance. The card itself, it's a good limited card. Like, as long as you have dinosaurs, right? Like, enough targets for it, you can play this. I don't like 2/1s for 2, but there's enough going on here that I feel okay about it. Standard, unfortunately, I don't really see it getting there. You're just jumping through too many hoops, basically. Like a 2/1 for 2, so you're starting off a little bit short as what you want for 2 casting costs. And then aside from that, you have to have this thing die, and then when it does die, okay, now you have to have the mana to cast something. And if you do have that, do you have a good fight target? Maybe, maybe not. So, yeah, there's just too much. Like, the moon and stars have to align up perfectly for this card to actually do anything for you. And, you can get away with that in limited, where sometimes just the 2/1 body is going to be fine in certain situations, but you can't get away with that in standard. Deep-Root Elite. This was actually the professor's preview card from Tolarian Community College. And this was maybe my favorite of all his videos. And that's saying something, because he does a lot of amazing preview videos. So hope you get a chance to check it out. But it's a 3-1 Merfolk Warrior rare 1/1. Whenever another Merfolk enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target Merfolk you control. This is actually very powerful because, yes, it's only a 1/1 for 2. It's got to stay alive. It's a tad fragile. But if it does, quickly it starts spitting out +1/+1 counters, which can be used to bulk this up a little bit and keep it alive. Or it could be used to put on a creature with evasion, maybe one of your unblockable Merfolk, something like that. And again, I think this is just another tool of that Merfolk standard deck, which I have no doubt will be part of the meta. We saw some amazing cards yesterday and the day before that really push Merfolk. Merfolk are getting quite the push forward, I think. This is just another card. And is this one good enough for the modern version? I don't know 100% if it is. The modern deck is a little bit tighter, obviously, than the standard build will be. So I don't know if there's room for this here, but it's not a bad card regardless. I do think this definitely sees play in the standard Merfolk deck. And again, in limited, it's a great card if you're into Merfolk. If you're not, well, it's not that exciting, obviously. But if you have a fair amount of targets, then yeah, this will be decent for you. Forerunner of the Heralds. 3 Merfolk Scout. This is uncommon 3/2. When this enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a Merfolk card, reveal it, shuffle, put it on top. When another Merfolk enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on this. Unfortunately, you can only put it on this. Like, I feel like Merfolk have this thing where they can throw counters around. This card doesn't do that. But you are searching for the Merfolk you want, so that does go a long way for me. And a 3/2 for 4, that's not the worst thing in the world either, considering I'm tutoring and I have this other ability tied into it too. So I do think this is too expensive for the modern version of the deck. But could it make it into the standard? I think it could, especially if there's some key cards that you need to pull out to make your deck more consistent, like even a Lord or something like that, like the one we saw yesterday. Then this card could be really good for you. So perhaps it does get there. And aside from that, again, this is another one of those cards that if you have the targets, you have that really good Merfolk you want to search up or something like that, then yeah, it's worth running for you and limited for sure. If you don't have the targets, then you probably skip it. Polyraptor. Okay, I told you, remember the red Forerunner? Well, we're going to talk about that again here. 2 green and 6, Dinosaur Mythic 5/5 and Rage. When this is dealt damage, create a token that's a copy of Polyraptor. Alright, wow. So it's expensive. Let's cut to the chase here. It costs 8, 2 green, 6. It's not cheap. You only get a 5/5 body for that too. But that Enrage ability, if you can exploit that, is actually super sweet. And there's ways to turn that on. Obviously, we saw even some ways in the first Ixalan. So how do you pull this off? Well, Forerunner combos an amazing way with this. And I'm going to try to keep this short. And I don't want to get too complicated here. But basically, if I play Forerunner, I search this up, put it on top of my library. Draw this the next turn. As long as I have the mana to cast it, that's the real trick. I'm going to cast this thing. It triggers the Forerunner. And it's going to ping this. Which means it's going to create another one. So then it creates another one. All creatures get pinged again. So now I'm getting 2 more of these things. Okay, that's the second ping. The next one of the 2 enters the battlefield. Just put it on the stack, enters the battlefield. You get a third ping. Now that third ping is going to kill the Forerunner. However, you're getting 3 more dinosaurs from that third ping. And then that 4th dinosaur is going to also resolve, which is the one that didn't resolve from the first time. So you end up with 7 Polyraptors if you do that. 7. Okay, and you did 3 damage to everything on the board, which could have knocked out some blockers too. So, wow, right? Like, that's pretty amazing. And that's just a 2-card combo, but it's not cheap. I don't think it's going to be the next copycat or anything like that because of the expense. I mean, 8 mana to cast this is quite a bit. But I gotta wonder, we've been talking about some good ramp spells, but nothing to ramp into. Is this something I want to ramp into? Is this a combo I want to take time to try to assemble in standard? I haven't brewed this thing. I haven't even seen all the cards in the set, so I don't want to say yes. But it's something to think about. The other thing to remember, too, there's cards like Sheltering Light out there, which just costs 1 white at instant speed that can actually protect and make your Forerunner indestructible. And then, because it's a May effect, it won't create an endless loop. You can stop when you want, and you can have as many Polyraptors as you desire. you can have, I don't know, what, 100,000? Is that enough? A million? Whatever. So that's actually kind of amazing when you think about it. Again, I don't think it's copycat because it's going to cost more resources. It's a little harder to set up than that combo was. But this is something else, though. Really, this is pretty crazy. Even if it's just a casual thing that happens or something people try to pull off in Commander, this is actually a thing you have to be aware of. I don't know if it gets there in Standard, but again, maybe with things like Growing Rights of Itlimoc, something like that, maybe you can ramp into some sort of combo deck. Who knows? So I'm looking forward to see if anyone can pull that off. Now, for limited purposes, this is awesome for you, right? 8 mana, especially in a world where you have treasure tokens and such, that's not that hard to get to in Ixalan. So you'll get there eventually most of the time, and you get yourself a 5/5 that's really difficult to deal with. Your opponent needs a destroy spell or they're kind of in trouble. Even if they try to double block this thing to get rid of it, you're getting another copy. So they block it with a 3/3 and a 2/2 to save themselves, but okay, you just killed 2 of their creatures. This dies, you get another one, right? So that gets kind of crazy too. They just lose 2 creatures as almost like a tempo play, just slow you down for a turn. Awesome card. I really love the design here. A lot of fun. Dinosaur synergies as well on top of everything else. So this is one to watch. I'll be interested to see where this goes. Thunder Herd Migration. This is going to cost a green and 1. It's a sorcery uncommon. It's an additional cost to cast this. Reveal a dinosaur or pay 1 more. Search your library for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So basically, rampant growth, but you have to show a dinosaur or pay 1 more mana for it. Rampant growth's a great card, actually. So could this help the dinosaur deck get there? Yeah, this actually could very well help the dinosaur deck. And it kind of makes sense because dinosaurs, they want ramp. They also might want some color fixing depending on the direction of the deck. If they start trying to incorporate more colors compared to the Gruul deck we saw last time around, which they could very well. Look at some of these Elder Dinosaur Legends. Who knows? Maybe you want to splash one of those in an off color or something. Or you might just want to go maybe more stricter Naya. So depending where that deck actually ends up, yeah, this card does see standard play. If that deck can get there, this is a shoo-in. Outside of dinosaurs, would you play with this? Actually, there's some decks that might want this. I don't know, maybe not any right now, but down the road, a rampant growth for 3 is actually not the worst thing in the world either. So yeah, I do think this is a big contender for standard, not just in this meta, but in the future metas to come too. Now, for limited purposes, same thing. You're going to be happy to fix your color with this if you're splashing a color. You're going to be happy to ramp a little bit. It's going to be great if you're in dinosaurs or have a fair amount of dinosaurs from your draft or sealed pool. But even if you don't, it could still be good for you. So it's actually a pretty awesome card. Okay, it's not rampant growth, but I don't think that's ever going to come back in the standard scene, unfortunately. So this is maybe the next best thing. Azor the Lawbringer. Alright, this costs 2 blue, 2 white, and 2. It's a legendary creature Sphinx. It is a mythic 6/6 flying. And when this enters the battlefield, each opponent can't cast instant or sorcery spells during that player's next turn. Whenever this attacks, you may pay an X white and 2 blue. If you do, you gain X life and draw X cards. So basically, Sphinx's Revelation happens. Alright. Now the question is this a good card? Where do you see it being played? Let's start off with Commander with this one, because this is a card that I would enjoy playing with in Commander. Maybe not the best choice, but you know what? I would love to play with this. Maybe do a few Sphinx's Revelations as the game goes on. Very powerful effect. And it's also a nice size flyer. I actually just really like it for those reasons. There's probably better things you can choose, but this is a really cool Azorius commander, potentially. Now, aside from that, when it comes to the world of limited, yes, slam dunk, probably first pick a lot of the time. It's not the easiest thing to cast in the world. 2 blue and 2 white. But if you can pull this thing off, getting a 6/6 flyer is going to be very, very powerful. And then those other abilities can be relevant too at times. Being able to cut your opponent off from casting instant or sorcery spells during their next turn pretty much is going to protect it, almost like giving it haste in a way, so that you can almost guarantee that you're going to be able to attack with it next time. I think that's pretty sweet. So then you attack, and as long as you have the mana to do the Revelation, you're going to be in a real good spot. Now, what about standard? First thing I need to point out, Sphinx's Revelation was as good as it was because it was an instant. So you don't have to kind of show your hand. You just sit there, let your opponent take their turn. If they don't play anything you need to counter, you Revelations, and you're going to have a pretty good day after that, right? That was just how that whole deck worked back in the day in Standard. This card doesn't do that for you because you have to do it when this attacks, which means you don't want to tap out typically when you're a control deck in those type of situations. So you're not going to do Revelations for as much as you would as if it was an instant card, right? So that makes it a lot worse than the original spell that this is based on. So remember that. But it does give you a sizable body, which is pretty cool. And again, there's probably a good chance you're at least attacking in with this maybe one time, if nothing else. Now, is that good enough for like a standard control deck? I don't know, because I do think there's better win conditions out there that are simpler, easier to cast, and aren't so mana intensive as this is. And I do think those simpler answers are probably going to be where those decks go as opposed to something like this, unfortunately. But from a lore point of view, I'm glad they made this card too with Azor. It's actually really sweet. The art looks amazing as well. So I really like this card for maybe it's just commander and cubes and such, but overall, I think it's a really cool design. Profane Procession. Okay, this one comes to us from a Chinese simplified language preview. This is actually a transform card, so let's look at the front side first. It's a black, a white, and 1 legendary enchantment. Black, white, and 3, exile target creature. Then, if there are 3 or more creatures exiled with this, transform. It doesn't say may, at least according to this translation, but that sounds right to me. I think it would be too good if you got to choose that. Now, the front side seems pretty sweet. Let's talk about the other side when it transforms. Tomb of the Dusk Rose, legendary land. Tap for 1 mana of any color. Pay a black, a white, and 2, and tap. Put 1 creature card exiled with this permanent onto the battlefield under your control. Okay, awesome card for Esper control. And I do think if there is an Esper control deck that can make it in the standard meta, this card will be a part of it because it protects it early. You can use that effect when you need to use it, like wait for your opponent to attack, for example, and then use it, or just simply wait till their end of turn. That way you can hold up your counter magic and such, and then steal that creature so you don't have to deal with it next time around. And then later on, once you do that 3 times, now you can start doing the same thing in the reverse order. Start putting those creatures out on your side of the battlefield. And again, you can do that at the end of your opponent's turn. Super sweet. Lets you hold up your control spells and such, and makes your opponent guess as to what they can pull off, what they can't pull off. So this is a fantastic control card. This is also good for you in limited, even if you're not like playing a control deck, because just stealing the creatures, I mean, it's removal, repeatable removal. That's excellent in limited. Probably a very high, if not tops, draft pick out of a lot of packs, honestly. So you're going to like it there. It's going to be really fun in Commander too, like stealing some really big things. Overall, awesome card. I love the design of most of these transform cards. Direfleet Neckbreaker. This is a red, a black, and 2. It's an orc pirate, uncommon 3/2. Attacking pirates you control get +2/+0. So this is the uncommon that is meant to boost pirates. Not quite as exciting as maybe the merfolk or vampire lords we saw yesterday. But okay, this is going to help your pirates along. But is it good enough is the question. Let's talk about limited first. I feel like in limited, this is a great card as long as you have enough pirates to interact with. Maybe in a seal pool, as long as you have at least a handful of pirates. Because remember, this thing is a forecasting cost 3/2, but this gets the ability as well. So attacking with this, it will attack in as a 5/2. Makes the forecasting cost feel a little bit better in that case. This does affect all pirates, including itself. So I could see this being played in some sealed pools, but draft is really where this is going to excel. If you can truly draft the pirate deck and get one, if you're lucky, 2 of these, you're going to have a pretty good deck on your hands, and you'll be able to go super aggro with your pirates, turn on those raid abilities. It could actually be quite good. Now, what about standard? Well, here's the thing. I like the idea that they're trying to boost the pirates, but is this enough to make me feel like the pirate deck will be a thing in standard? Quite honestly, it isn't. Just because this costs 4, it's really kind of top end when you're talking about aggro, and it closes off the ability to use other than pirates really in your aggro deck and get any sort of benefit from this card. So in other words, I might want to build an aggro deck for standard, but I don't want to just stick to pirates. There's a lot of good aggro cards outside of that particular tribe, right? This card closes me off. If I go in this direction, I'm pretty much looking at pirates. That's my focus. And I don't know if that's a good enough deck to get there, especially when you consider how good some of these decks are. I mean, look at Energy, Ramanap Red, even Vehicles. And I do think the Merfolk and maybe even Vampire decks could be very strong in the next meta. Among other things like Control decks, I think Approach decks get better. I think Esper Control could be a thing. So do Pirates stack up to what I just mentioned there? I haven't seen enough to make me feel like the answer is yes, at least not yet. We've got a couple more days of previews, maybe that will change, but at least right now, I just don't see it. I feel like the Pirates are still lacking something when it comes to the explosiveness compared to some of the other decks that I mentioned just now. So I guess we'll wait and see with this one, but I'm a little skeptical the Pirates are going to get there. Jungle Creeper. Green, black 1, elemental, and it's an uncommon 3/3. You can pay a green, a black, and 3, and this will go from your graveyard to your hands. So first off, when it comes to standard, a little too expensive for standard. I mean, a 3/3 for 3, 2 different colors, and then that ability is kind of expensive. 5 to get it back, you're going to have to recast it, so it's just not doing enough to get you there in standard, even if you are playing something with graveyard interactions, which this card does play with a graveyard, so definitely worth noting that. Now, as far as limited goes, I think it's actually a good limited card. I'd be happy to play this. 3/3 for 3 with the possibility to bring it back later if I need to my hand, recast it. In a limited game that's going to be a little bit slower, whether that be draft or sealed, this is actually a pretty good beater. I like the card a lot for those purposes. And like I said, I think there's more graveyard stuff yet to come, so we'll have to stay tuned to see what else comes out over the next couple days. Protean Raider. Okay, this one's a red, blue, and 1. It's a Shapeshifter Pirate, 2/2. It's a rare. And it has Raid. If you attack with a creature this turn, you may have this enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield. So basically a clone. Clones typically don't make it into like standard because they are too high variance. It just depends on board state if they're going to be good or not. Sometimes they'll be great. Most of the time, though, you're kind of searching for a target. This one is a lot worse, too, because even though it's 1 less converted mana cost, you do have to pay a red. So now you're into 2 colors, and you have to get the raid trigger for it to actually be a clone, and then you still have to have something worth cloning. Yikes. It's not for me, honestly. Now, it also is a pirate in a pinch, but it's only a 2/2 for 3, and it's 2 different colors. That doesn't feel really good. Limited purposes, yeah, I'd play it there, because clones are going to be a little bit better, because even though they are still not consistent, you don't need them to be as consistent to be okay or at least playable in draft or seal, but it's fine there. I mean, maybe middle of the pack pick or something like that. It's a decent creature. And in a pinch, like I said, it's still a 2/2 pirate, which sometimes that will matter too. Starfleet Sprinter. This is a red, a blue, and 1 human pirate, uncommon 2/2 with haste, and it can't be blocked. Wow. Well, I'll say this right off the bat. I don't really see this in standard. I do think it's just a little too small for what you're paying for it in standard. There's a lot of ways to remove it. It's just not going to be super consistent for you. In limited, though, this thing's actually kind of awesome. It's an uncommon. You'll see a few of these going around the draft. And I've said that a lot this week. I mean, there's a lot of strong uncommons in this set. In this particular one, not only is it a nice little beater, I mean, just getting in every turn for 2 mana is actually pretty sweet. And it has haste, so you can just start off on turn 3, perhaps, just getting in there. And beyond that, though, it turns on raid, which is a huge deal if you're playing with other pirates and raid effects. And this is just a raid enabler, and it's actually a very good one. So I think this is a high draft pick, especially if you want to try to force pirates and maybe some raid. Or maybe it shows up in pack 3 when you've got a lot of raid cards already, and then you're going to be really happy to see this. So yeah, just generally, I think it's going to be a good card for draft and for sealed, if nothing else. Okay, we got another transform card here. This one is a Japanese language preview, and it's actually a creature. Golden Guardian, it costs 4. It's an artifact creature golem. It's a defender, pay 2. Fights another target creature you control. When this dies, return it to the battlefield transformed under your control. It's a 4/4. And let's look at that other side real quick. Goldforge Garrison, it's a land, tap, add 2 mana of any 1 color to your mana pool. Pay 4 and tap, create a 4/4 colorless golem artifact creature token. That's not bad. So here's the issue, though, with the card, is the transform piece is a little awkward for me, because you do have to fight your own creature. Now, do note, though, fighting your own creature doesn't have to kill it. So you can fight like a 1/1 and then maybe block a 3/3 or something like that, or do something else to get rid of it. You just have to fight at some point during your turn with one of your own creatures. So there's ways to make that a little better for you than it could be, I suppose. Once you transform it, okay, it gives you a couple mana. That's nice for fixing, a little bit of ramp. And yeah, pay 4 and tap, get a 4/4 colorless creature. That's not bad, but I do think it's not quite good enough for the hoops you have to jump through to get there. Now, the card itself being a 4/4 defender, even if you don't take into account the ability, sometimes that's relevant for 4 just because you need to deal with some early or mid-range creatures and maybe your deck is a little bit slower. So 4 mana, you're still taking probably some early damage, but if you can put this out, it really makes your opponent think, because they have to really think about their attacks at that point. If they want to attack with a 3/3 and you have a 1/1 creature, that could lead to a transformation. They got to keep that in mind. So it makes combat a little more difficult for them. I do like that. With that being said, I don't really see this making it into standard, But because of the reasons I mentioned, I would be happy to play it in Draft or Sealed. Maybe not a top pick for me, but I don't think it's going to be a bad card for you, especially if you have a slower, maybe more methodical deck. Silent Gravestone. This was the preview for Magic Mike's last night, actually. It costs 1. It's an artifact. It's a rare. Cards in graveyards can be targets of spells or abilities. Pay 4, tap, exile Silent Gravestone, and all cards from all graveyards draw a card. I'm glad this exists, and here's why. Because they are thinking a little more about actually putting answers within the sets. Now, graveyard shenanigans, we're seeing a smattering of them so far in this set. Now, we got more cards to see, so maybe there'll be more. But I will say this. Maybe the graveyard mechanics we're seeing now are more of a foreshadowing of what we might be seeing in an upcoming set like Dominaria. If that's the case, it's good that they kind of planted this already, because you don't want to have to create one of these answers after the fact. You want this to be right there from the get-go, right? So if any sort of graveyard shenanigan becomes too powerful in Standard, we have something to fall back on, so it's very good. Now, outside of Standard, if you need it for some reason, does this see play in Modern, Legacy, Vintage? No, I don't think so, because I think there's better ones. Like, I like Rest in Peace a lot. I like Relic of Progenitus a lot. I don't think this replaces those. But for the Standard environment, if we ever needed it, it's there for us. We probably don't need it today, but again, you never know. We have seen some interesting graveyard interactions over the last couple of days. Not a lot of them, but enough to make me say, I wonder what's coming up. Now, what about Limited? It's not really good there for you. Unless you run into some sort of graveyard shenanigans in Draft or Seal, then just board it in. But I wouldn't start off with the card necessarily or anything like that. But like I said, maybe not an amazing card, but I'm glad it's here. All right, there you go. Those are the cards for today. I'm going to try to get this video out as quick as possible. These cards have just been coming out so fast and so frequent. It's been really tough. So it's crazy. Tomorrow, we're going to be back with one more video. And then on Friday, we actually get the full set. So we'll begin our full set review, which is pretty crazy. This has been fast and furious. But hey, until next time, thanks for watching. It's always appreciated. Please remember to like, subscribe. Have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.